Okay, we're going to begin our workshop. While we are waiting to begin our city council meeting, we have one citizen to be heard. Adam, if you'd give your full name and your address.
It's not on, you're gonna,
After last night.
Adam Holzhauer, 111 Custody Way, Bentley Manor subdivision, president of the Bentley Manor Homeowners Association. I just wanted to make a brief request. I know that it was mentioned last night that you're going to be meeting with DOT here in next week, is it, Bill, or soon?
we'll be meeting with TxDOT in the next week or two.
Okay, okay, yeah, I want to put our request again to take under consideration a traffic light at the corner of Farn Castle and Lock Hill Soma Road, which is what we call our northern entrance to our subdivision. Traffic is picking up heavily on Lock Hill Soma, and we're building out the last 37 lots. We're told last night that Bitter Blue is anticipating those to be completed, or at least the last building under construction by first quarter of next year. So we'd like to try to see if we could get a traffic study, or possibly they would consider putting a traffic light in to help our regress, whatever, to the from our subdivision. So you can take under consideration anything that you do when you meet with TxDOT on our behalf, we really appreciate it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Adam. Brings us to item 3, discussion fiscal year 2017-2018 proposed budget. Bill?
We do have a couple of handouts here, so this one that starts with the PowerPoint that's, FY 2017-18 budget workshop. There's a couple capital things we're going to go over there. Then we have the proposed general fund equipment replacement schedule as an attachment. Then council asked for us to review purchasing crack seal machine, and Brandon's put some information there together associated with that. So we'll start off with the budget workshop PowerPoint, and I'll just remind you that in previous workshops, we've had the fire department chief, the police chief, and the public works director present kind of what they presented to me in terms of their capital replacement stuff. Not all that was funded. So what we thought we'd do is we'd start off by just kind of reviewing the bidding as to what is included in the proposed city manager's budget, what's not, and then revisit the cost and the amount funded already in capital replacement or not. So if you go to the second page, it's fire department. And you'll see that the chief has established some priorities for capital replacement goods. And there's a priority description. There's the item cost. There is a column that talks about whether it's funded in the capital replacement fund. Some of it is and some of it isn't. If it is funded, do we have it fully funded, or is there additional requirements? And then is it included into the city manager's FY 17-18 budget? Yes or no? So Chief Naughton's first priority was the self-contained breathing apparatus, which by law has to be maintained and has a shelf life of certain things. As we went through this in our pre-budget planning, I think I already mentioned this, those expire in December of 18. And so what we've done is, because we haven't had it fully funded, is we deferred this purchase a year so that we work at next budget. It gives us a year to save and contribute into the capital replacement fund, because you can see there's a shortfall of almost $70,000, actually $60,000. And so we'll be putting approximately $30,000 in this year that's included in the budget, in the capital replacement. And that'll set us up next year to fully fund it and then to purchase it. And then we would purchase it immediately after the budget passes in October. So we deferred that this last year. Second item was the ambulance. We briefed that before. You can see that the budget, the cost approximately is $180,000. We have $141,000 approximately in the capital replacement. It's going to take about $39,000. That has been proposed in the city manager budget. So we did propose that, and that is included in the budget. And you can kind of read down through there. Same thing with the striker stretcher, that was funded. The mobile data terminals were funded in the budget. The fire chief and fire captain computers, the vehicle dash, the cooling fan, and then there were certain things that were not funded. The update to the security access control system, the emergency generator, which would be a shared emergency generator for the fire admin and the public works building, was not funded in the budget. The BullX live fire trainer was not funded, but we did fund a replacement AC for the living quarters, primarily because it was partially funded already, and we're not going to plan on replacing it unless the AC goes bad. So it's a contingency funding based upon the fact that it's partially funded, and we'll go from there. And the body-worn camera and taser was actually funded from Crime Control Prevention District funds. So that lays out the fire department. If you turn to the next page, Public Works Director established his priorities. His first priority was a backhoe replacement. And in that priority, because of the urgency required with that, we amended the budget here at the last council meeting, and council funded it this last year in 17-18, so it did not need to be included in this year's budget. But then there were some other items that were funded. So you'll see that the mower and the HVAC and the were the two other items that were funded, and the scaffolding. So the mower and the HVAC, primarily because they're fully funded in the capital replacement fund already. And so that's really an effective transfer. And then the scaffolding, because of the low cost and because we actually have a pretty high demand for it, and we're having to rent lifters, you know, this will be a cost neutral action there. So none of the other items were funded. I will move on past this, but later we have some additional information on a crack seal machine, in which we can then discuss later on, but I want to get through this first. Next is the water budget. Again, when you prioritize water capital items, the backhoe replacement was number one, and that's been funded this year in advance, and so we did not need to include it in the budget this year. So that left number two item was to replace the 2-inch water main cliffside with an 8-inch and loop the system. So we have $40,000 in the city manager's proposed budget that is planned, so it is included in the budget. We don't know the exact cost. $40,000 is a target number. It could cost higher than that, but we won't know that until we develop options, and we're obviously going to try to keep it as low as we can. So that is funded in the city manager's budget. The line locator for $5,000, we did not have anything in capital replacement, but we did fund that in the budget out of the water. The replacement of water meters is covered under the capital replacement fund, and so we funded that. At the same time, there's also additional funding that goes into the capital replacement a little later, but we're not talking that right now. So that's how that goes. The only other thing that we funded was raising 5 fire hydrants. We budgeted $2,000 for that, and that is included in the budget. So again, this was run through the Water Advisory Committee, and they've approved that, and we got their blessing on that. The police department, because of the flexibility we have with the Crime Control Prevention District funds that we have, and I don't have all the information on the fund balance here, but we've gone through all that several meetings, that all these items were funded for the police department, and most of this was funded from the Crime Control Prevention District budget, with the exception maybe of the refrigerator. So again, the takeaways from that, again, not included in here, but the capital replacement fund was fully funded, which is an important aspect of projecting for the future. I don't have the exact number in my budget, but we can look at it. It's approximately a little less than $300,000. And in the process of doing that this year, we've made changes and improvements and updates to the capital replacement schedule itself. And again, it's an iterative process. Every year, you know, we're working to make it more accurate, to adjust the purchase price as required, the projected years and when it's due. And we do take a hard look at that. And if we can, we may have something, we have things where we fully funded it, but we don't need to replace it, and we'll defer that as much as we can. So I think our estimate is that we probably got that capital replacement funds and scheduled at about 90-95%. There's always room for improvement, but we made improvements this year. And then, you know, there is some flexibility to fund some of these capital replacements but only from fund balance. So again, we briefly talked about that in more detail last time. And the one item that you had asked us to take a look at was the crack seal machine. So if you'll turn to this piece of paper here, which looks like a staff summary sheet, was prepared by Brandon. I reviewed it. Brandon really did a good job on this. And I know you haven't had a chance to review it, but I'll just kind of summarize it. And you can quickly summarize it by looking at the pictures of what the current operation is, which is a pump that sits on top of a 55-gallon can of tar versus a trailer pulled device that's got heating elements, et cetera. So again, let me just kind of go through this. The current operation is made up of a $4,500 pump. It's a number of years old. It's been purchased maybe 5, 7 years ago. Brandon, do you know when it was purchased? 2009 approximately. And it sits on a 55-gallon drum, pumps liquid, cold pour product. It's powered by an air compressor. It's slow and messy. It takes time for crews to swap out the barrel and mix it. It is difficult. It's a lot of prep time, about 45 minutes. And then there's an evening, closure period where after you spray, you really have to do a significantly difficult, good job of cleaning it off. And if you don't clean it, then the tar gets frozen in it, and then it gets ruined and so forth. So it's very high maintenance. And the product, when you're doing it out on the field, I can just say when Willie was here, he would be the only one that would allow himself to do the actual crack sealing. We've expanded into that, but it can be messy, and we've seen that in the last couple of weeks that we've done some. So Brandon can probably talk more about this, and Brandon, if you want to, I'd ask you to come over here. I'll trade places so that everyone can hear, and you can talk about the new. Yeah, okay, you can do that. The new crack seal machine potential. What are the advantages and what are the efficiencies gained, and what are you looking for?
Okay, so
Turn it on.
Yes, sir, it's on.
And speak
So-
real close.
The new crack seal machines, there's two brands that we've actually looked at already. One's a Craftco and one is a Simline. Both of them have similar aspects to them, but basically the main objective is it's a block of asphalt that you can pretty much put into a melting pot. You can stick anywhere from 5 to 7 of these in at a time. Usually will be melted and prepared within 30 to 45 minutes. That's ample time for the guys basically to go in and get changed into a white suit and get their gloves and stuff ready, and by the time they get to the actual location, get their signs up, it's ready to go. In the actual lines themselves where the nozzle is, there's actually a heating element that's in those lines that will actually help keep the product moving through it so it does not clog the lines up. That is one of the big factors at the end of the night. If you don't get it emptied out completely, it will actually clog up the lines with that coal tar product. This both of these two machines have a reverse cycle on them where it will actually suck the material that's in the hose and in the lines. It will pull it back into the melting pot. And then at the end of the night, basically, you've pretty much cleaned out as much as you can out of that line. The next morning when you fire it back up, the heating elements will actually finish cleaning the rest of it out and liquefying it. So it's ready to go the next morning. As far as the actual cleanup in the evenings, they were saying it's going to take maybe 15, 20 minutes to clean up and put the machine away. So whereas right now they're taking almost an hour to actually put the hose into the barrel, run water through it for a while to get all of the material that's in the line out, and then they actually have to finish cleaning it with water. So once they've put all of the excess material back into the material barrel, they'll switch over and pump water through it and cycle it to try and clean it out as much as possible. I believe one of the pictures that's actually in here, it's page 2. It's the second page of the pictures. You can actually see the material building up on the actual pump line itself that's inside the water barrel. It's very difficult to actually get that clean, and it's a mess. The guys won't have to worry about any of that because the machine itself, when it heats up, it cleans itself out pretty much. The hose isn't going to be dragged behind the trucks as well. You don't have the air compressor that is attached from inside the truck to the pump that's on the trailer, so you don't have those hoses dragging either. Everything is on the trailer that you need, and hopefully it's going to make it a lot better of an operation. I've seen both of these type of machines in operation, and other cities, municipalities of our size actually have these, and they say they work perfectly fine.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Brandon? Mike?
I'll speak up. Can you tell me how many days out of a month that you would normally spend doing crack sealing, and how much time you believe that this would save your guys and allow them to be more productive?
As far as time, we probably don't spend as much time out there as what we need to right now, just because of the staff members I have. I've got a lot of tasks. If they were actually out in the field right now, they do roughly 1 drum a day, which is 55 gallons. With the melting pot, they're hopefully going to be able to hit about 100 to 120 gallons a day, so double the production for 1 day time.
So there was, when Willie was here and we had a full crew, there were cycles. So obviously in the winter months and stuff, it's harder to do this. And so we were typically trying to do a section of the city at a time. So the old section north, the old section south, the estates, and then the old new, however you want to call it. And it's been a struggle to keep up with our planned schedule. Part of it is the difficulty of the machine. Part of it's personnel. I would say that in terms of the street maintenance, crack sealing your streets is one of the most effective ways to extend the life of your streets. And so we're constantly behind. I mean, I can tell you that there's several streets in the old Chavano Drive, Saddle Tree, Fawn, come to mind as the worst 3. But since I've been here, I think crack sealed them 3 times, and there's still sections of it need to be crack sealed again. That crack sealing is being effective. We're going to have to address those streets in the next few years at some point in time anyway. But specifically in Chavano Creek, that's where you have a pretty big base. You got curbs and you have a pretty quality street, but where you have those cracks, keeping them crack sealed is going to greatly extend the cost, and in the long run, the more you can do, the more you're going to extend the life and save monies for it. It's from the public works standpoint, one of the most important things we do.
Mary Ann, did you have a question or comment?
I just had a couple of questions. First, you said you've actually seen the work or the machine in use at other municipalities and see it being successful.
Yes, I have.
Do you have a time estimate of how long
these blocks of the other material are all made here locally by Ergon Asphalt and Emulsion and other suppliers that are here locally, so I don't have to pay for that trucking and wait for the material to get in here. There was one point that we were actually waiting a little over a month because we didn't have any material and they were backlogged. So we didn't, even though I ordered it in advance, knowing what streets we had left, I was still waiting on them for a month to ship the material to us.
And is the 50K that's in the proposed request, is that about an accurate cost?
Yes,
or-
there's actually two, I don't know if they got put in there, there's two proposals actually in there.
We did not include the proposals, but you can talk the general cost factors.
Both of them, there's one that's 150 gallon, which is the sim line. That one is coming in, I believe it was just over $46,000. And then the Craftco, which is a 125 gallon pot, was coming in at 45,000. So they're about $1,000 difference.
And one of the questions that Mike was speaking to was the efficiency. Now, Bill, would you reiterate to us how we are doing our crack sealing right now and what we're accomplishing? Are we getting this all done every year on what we have scheduled, or are we finding that there are not enough days in the year to complete the process, and so we're falling farther behind?
We have, in the first, a couple of years ago, we met our schedule. And we haven't met our schedule this year or last year. We're falling behind. But we made progress, so we've completed the estates. We did good work this year, but it's been tough. And again, a cycle to do this because of the conditions of our road is becoming, it's pretty frequent. Not so much in Chavano Creek or the estates, but certainly up in the old new and then the old part of the city.
Okay, and the existing crack seal, when we put it down, is very messy, it's very tacky, you drive over it, it kind of bubbles up over the top. Is it still gonna be that same damage that we're gonna have on all the vehicles in Chavano Park with the new equipment? Or could y'all address how we're going to be, what can we expect for our citizens as far as the difference between what we're doing right now and what we might do if we buy this equipment?
I think I've talked to Brendan about this, and it's a more effective application on the cracks, and so you'd have a cleaner application, which would be less flow. Right? Currently, now he has to put a whole bunch on it, and then you use a squeegee.
But the new machine's basically right where the nozzle actually comes down and actually can be put into the cracks. There's a V squeegee that runs right behind it, and then you only have 6 inches of material that's going to be left from the nozzle. So when you stop, you have 6 inches worth of material. Right now, they've got the full length of the one, which is 4 feet of material that's actually in there. So if they don't stop soon enough, that's when they get all that additional material that's left on the streets.
Okay, so right now we have a puddling problem. How does it dry any faster, any slower? Is it the same amount of time?
They're saying that the hot part will actually be cooled off and be able to drive on it within 2 hours. And it's not gonna leave anything tacky to the tires or anything like that. It will actually cure and be safe to drive on. And then we can move to the other side of the street. We can be in people's driveways during the day. And if we stop by, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they come home 4 to 5 o'clock, they'll be able to drive on it, go in their driveway without leaving the track.
Okay, so how does that compare with the current drying time?
Right now, it takes forever because it's a cold product, so it's at atmospheric temperature already as far as where the ground is. So it takes a while for it, so it still leaves it as tacky. For example, when we went over to Chavano Creek, they stopped at 3:30, and at 5 o'clock we went over there and we're still working it, and it was still stickier than ever. It was sticking to the bottom of the boots like big time.
The current or the new? Did you,
The
okay, the current, okay. Michelle?
Does this mean that, that you'll then, what? Does this mean that you'll be able to do crack sealing all year long? Like there's no, like it's better to do it in the summer or?
It's actually bad to kind of do it right now in the summer. We're just trying to play catch up because
Oh.
we're stuck with our time frame we are in. But typically going through it in the wintertime, it will actually cure a lot faster.
Okay, Mary Ann?
What is the lifespan of the vehicle? Maybe you said that and I didn't hear it.
The equipment, most of the other cities are getting roughly 20, 25 years out of it.
Okay, anybody else on the crack ceiling?
So, oh yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry. I thought,
Is the product the same effective as what we're using now or better? I mean, is the, because you're using a melted product with this new one versus the liquid, correct?
Correct.
Is the lifespan of the product in the crack equal, better?
I haven't really heard any differences between the two products. It's just one's a cold application, one's a hot application.
Right.
But for the most part, they're both made with, the one thing is I can't really get my hands on the current product we use because it has a patent on it and they don't want it out. So I can't really get all of the specs as much as I can on the hot application, the melting box.
And that's what you have to buy 12 barrels at a time or $5,000 worth or something like
Correct.
that to get them here freight paid. Is that what I
Correct.
understand? And the other stuff is made locally?
Yes, sir.
So we
If
can,
anything, the furthest I have to go is Pleasanton to pick it.
so it should be a less stocking type of deal.
Yes.
I imagine trying to find a place for 12 drums is a lot. It takes up a lot of room.
Yes, they're all stacked along the side of the shop.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Bill, you had something, and after you finish, we're gonna, without objection, we'll recess.
okay. I was just going to say that when Laura and I and Brandon looked at this, you know, I determined and I concurred with Brandon that there was a need for this. And so in the city manager's budget, what I proposed was to fund approximately half of it this year and then to fund half of it next year so that it would be purchased next year.
And what that means is in this fiscal year budget, is that what you're talking about, or you're talking about buying this in another 18 months?
Well, council asked us to present more information for the consideration of including it in this budget. And what I was going to say was we kind of halfway included it in the budget in terms of the capital replacement fund, and we were going to then defer it a year and then purchase it there. I'll go over this a little bit later on, but we currently already have about $8,000 in the capital replacement budget allocated for one of these machines. And in the city manager budget, we have $22,000 allocated in proposed funding. And so what I'm telling you is that that's about, he said 46,000 was the requirement. We have about 30,000 either already saved or allocated. So you're really only talking, if you gave us guidance and you wanted to see this included in the budget by consensus, we would then propose that and make adjustments to that. And so that would be about 16,000 that would need to come from fund balance to be able to include that. So, you know, the good news is that it's not the whole 46,000 you have to consider, although that's the total cost. There is some savings already for it and some already allocated in the current budget.
Okay, does anybody have any more items on this? If they don't, we will, without objection, we will recess back to our regular city council meeting. There being no objection, we will recess the workshop to return to our regular city council meeting to consider our budget calendar. Okay, we're returning from our recess to our workshop. I want to thank Mary Ann Heisel for her efforts to be here. Mary Ann has another commitment. She has just returned from Hawaii and has not slept in a long time. And she has left us, but we want to thank her for making it for our regular, or for our special city council meeting to enable us to have a quorum. We are now returning to our workshop. Have we finished off going through the capital improvements items, Bill?
Well, I wanted to just highlight this capital general fund equipment and replacement schedule. And so it's very similar to the one that's in your budget, but it's attached here. Laura has updated some of the descriptions, and we've also moved Public Works to be on the same page of admin, which in effect what that really did was that cleaned it up a little bit. It's still 3 pages, but you've got admin and Public Works all on first page. You got the fire department on the second page, and then the last page is really the summary. So again, the yellow column is the city manager proposed funding items there. And you can see that it's, for the most part, fully funded, and that we're tracking. So by each department, there's 43,000 in the admin, 61,000 in the Public Works. Fire department's 209,000, and then the total for the capital replacement fund is 314,000. So in this, on the last page, you can see that the updated replacement cost for all these capital items is $3.2 million. We have a reserve balance of 1.4. This city manager budget proposes adding 314,000, and there's still 1.367, or almost 1.4 millions, that is still required to fund in additional years. But incrementally, what we did, and I briefed you last time, was we're taking out about 200,000 and you're putting in about 300,000. So to some degree, there's a bit of a wash there, but you're incrementally increasing this, but you're allocating the funds so when you need it, you have it.
Okay. Before we go to talking about whether there's a consensus on these items and specifically on the crack seal, I want to know, are there items that were presented originally from Bill that people would like to discuss? Mike?
On the fire department, item number 8, emergency generator, emergency operations center, fire admin, share with PW office. Would the police department also benefit from this emergency generator? I mean,
If the city was in an emergency management situation, because we would have an EOC up?
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we're going to set up the EOC over in that area, right?
It won't help us in this building as far as keeping our operations going, but it would give us emergency management capability. We need to be working through the EOC coordinator, our manager of the city department.
Okay, so is there any chance that we can fund some of this through the crime prevention fund? If the police are going to be participating in the EOC, and one of the things that they're trying to do is prevent crime during a blackout and such.
Yeah, off the cuff, it seems like there's some logic to support that. I would want to go back to just take a look at what the authorized use is for, make sure I've reviewed it and I can say for certain, yeah, that would be covered, or we could make a case that we could fund it all or a portion or whatever it may be.
And Mike, the fact that we're not able to fund this doesn't mean that we won't be able to fund it from alternative sources in the coming year. This morning, Bill and I had a meeting with Senator John Cornyn's office to talk about grant applications, and one of the items that they specifically addressed, that Bill specifically addressed with them, was the possibility of having this control mechanism available to us. And to the extent that we can fund it through an alternative source, that would be great. But I think that what I'm hearing from Bill is, even if we could get to the crime control money, we would have to come up with the other 50% or greater to fund this in this budget cycle. Are you asking that we fund? Are you asking that we add this to the budget? Or are you asking us to explore this from the standpoint of how much could we get, and then come back and discuss whether we want to fund it? I just want to understand what.
I was just trying to understand whether or not it would facially allow us access to crime control funds. The other thing is we've got $26,000 in the municipal tract. That's part of the municipal tract. We could go half and half or something like that. So it's sort of like a pistol. You don't need one till you need one badly. You don't need an emergency generator till you need one badly. And I understand planning and all of that, but at the same time, if we have an emergency, we need it. and if we can get it in this budget cycle, I'd like to see us try it.
Okay. Does anybody else have an item that they would like to look at that's one of these specific items before we start talking about adding and subtracting? Are there other items? Michelle?
I don't have any other items. I'd just like to say if staff has put this together and they've ranked the importance of the items and they're ranked and approved by what they need most, I think we should go with that.
Okay. Does anybody else have an item that they'd like to bring out? I do have one item that I would like to bring out, and that is the Water Committee's fire hydrants. This is my first time to see us buying fire hydrants, and I don't really know what that is. I thought that there was fire hydrants.
It says raising them, extension.
So I can clarify that.
Yeah,
We
if you would
have,
tell me what that means.
we get the number wrong, it's approximately 10, 12 fire hydrants that they're actually in place now, but they're lower than where they need to be to facilitate the efficient flow of water out of the hydrant. And so this would, and Chief has completed an assessment, he's provided to that.
I'm not disagreeing with the idea. What I'm questioning is why is this a water department expense and why isn't this a city expense? That's my only question. Why is this a city expense? I don't disagree with spending the money.
Yeah, okay, I
My
understand
question,
now.
why does this fall into the water department?
Yeah, that's probably a good question. I
that-
think we can, it's a fire hydrant, but it's a firefighting need that we're trying to facilitate. I don't know. You have any thoughts on that? I think we can go either way.
Yeah, a lot of times the city.
I would rather go the city way because I don't understand that has to do with, when we provide water to houses, we don't pay for the faucets that people put in. They pay for their faucets. We just deliver the water. We take it to the edge of the property, and then they're responsible for taking it out of the pipe and getting it to the final use. That was my
Yeah.
only thought.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a valid comment.
Okay. Now let's go back, if we could, Bill, and thank you for providing the yellow line because it makes it so much easier to understand what we're talking about. The question is, how much goes into each one of these categories? And Michelle has commented already that she thinks that if staff has made these recommendations, and don't let me take the words out of your mouth or mischaracterize them, but I think that Michelle has already said, well, this is a pretty good starting point, but I do think that council members should have an opportunity to say faster or slower or all the way on any of the items that you've listed. So if you don't mind, before we leave this chart, for us to say faster, slower, or I want it completely done, because nobody's indicated that they want to eliminate things, but they've said they may have faster or slower or completed. Does anybody have any items that they would like to faster, slower, completed? Mike?
Actually, mine is just a question, Mr. Mayor, and that is, because we have so many divergent estimated scheduled years to replace, we're gonna have longer and shorter times to hit those replacement costs. Does this 300 and, I can't remember numbers, $14,000 and a half, will that get us to those scheduled replacement dates if in subsequent years we continue to fund at the level that we're doing this?
Yes, and so behind this is a spreadsheet, and we handed out last time, and so that each one of these, then if it's a 20-year expense, she's actually got 20 years of columns that she allocates associated with that, and then it would be on track there, yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have an item that they'd like to talk about? Okay, I'd like to, if nobody has something that they'd like to bring up, I would like to bring up the crack sealer and doing a 2-year funding. We are short on men, and we're not getting the job done right now on our roads. They're probably, from a city standpoint, they're the most expensive thing that we have in the entire city. I know that fire trucks cost a lot, but if you take the aggregate of all the roads, they are the most expensive capital improvement that we have in this entire city. And if we can take care of them better, we can get an extra 5 years out of them. And that's 5 years that we're not spending taxpayer money to replace those roads. And going with something that has been a poor stepchild in this city and continuing to use that for another year doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to me. We're short-staffed, this is a force multiplier, we're going to be able to get the job done right the moment that we have this on board, and waiting 15 months to have it on board, I question the logic in the delay.
Yeah, again, I was just trying to be thrifty on the budget, but I wouldn't disagree. I think Brandon makes a strong case of that, and truthfully, it emerged kind of as we were just developing this budget, and there were some things coming. So I would support doing that. I can do it either way, but I think that's, when I look at that, and I can see that you're going to get immediate advantages. And then when I put it in perspective, I'm not having to come up with 46,000, I really only have to come up with 16 more, then that makes it easier to adjust.
Bob?
That's what I got here, but, you mentioned being in arrears with trying to catch up with all this work. How far in arrears do you think we are as far as the crack ceiling with the current needs that we have?
In the current goals and objectives, we are supposed to have all of Shamrock Creek completed by the end of this fiscal year. And at the rate we're going right now, we'll get there.
Okay, so that's Shamrock Creek, and then what's right behind that?
That's it for this. We're gonna start back up on the north side, of that 1604, basically coming from Wagon Trail down to, Farm, on the, east side of Northwest Military, starting in the old section.
And Bob, I don't know if you came in, but I think that Brandon said this is almost twice as fast? Is that what I kind of heard you say?
That's what I'm gonna push you guys at, because right now, doing a 55-gallon drum, the amount of time it takes to make some prep it in the morning, get out there and actually do it, have time for it to cure and get off the streets again. We can basically go through and melt 6 to 7 blocks within 30 to 45 minutes in the morning. That's their time to get dressed in their suits, get out, put their street signs up, and be ready to roll. And then, as they're going throughout the day, we go to stop, take lunch break or whatever, they can throw in 6 more blocks while they're at lunch. It's melted, and they hit the road again for the afternoon.
And I think subsequent to that is the issue you brought up last time was the cleanup part of it that's an issue.
Yes.
Which sounds like that's created a lot of time after the job just to clean up.
Yes.
And I guess we got a bond with some residents recently, so sounds like that's another piece of it.
Okay, Mike?
What are we projecting the end of the year to look like as far as over or under revenues and expenditures? Might the money be in the budget already and we just haven't talked about it?
Well, good point, and we do project an overage, and we talked about that a bit last meeting. So was that number somewhere near 200,000?
Yes, right now, fund balance would be, is expected to be $2,639,798. Sorry. With the projections that were in the city manager budget, I have made a few tweaks, but revenue is expected to be about 157,000 over, expenses about 44,000 less, so together it's 201,000 into fund balance.
Okay. Anybody else?
Is there general consensus to make an adjustment to the budget and to include this in this next FY?
I see Mike Colomere nodding his head. Yeah, okay, we have,
Okay.
it looks like there's a consensus to do that.
Okay.
Well, so I guess I just want to kind of, do we want to take the entire thing from fund balance and allocate the 20 2,000 to other items in Public Works, or we just want to kind of, because it's kind of one hand or the other, but it will look different.
Right, but as I understand our spending, our fund balance ordinance, is that you take those capital reserves first, and the last thing you do is that fund balance. So it would seem to me that just following our normal routine policies of how we pull money and spend it, that would answer the question. Or am I oversimplifying as usual?
I think we do it.
Okay, so where we're leaving this is, before we leave this page and go on to the next item, we talked about 2 items. We moved the fire hydrants from water department to someplace else, which I guess is Public Works. And we're moving the crack sealer to come forward and fully fund in the next fiscal year. Is there anything else that anybody has? Okay, Bill, next item.
I haven't prepared anything for this specifically, but we reviewed the Public Works Director's needs, the fire and the police needs. And there were 2 items that were identified before, but were not presented in the budget. But one of them has kind of come to head here, and I'm now going to present 2 of them. And I'll just tell you, Laura, both of them are personal actions. One of them has to do with the admin personnel.
Okay. I thought you
Personnel.
said personal.
I did.
I
misspoke.
Stop you right then.
It's like, whoa.
I'm representing the fact that Laura has, for the last 3 months, talked to me and staff pretty regularly about the fact that we are in need of a human resources individual, okay? And so I'm going to not disagree with her or necessarily agree with her at this time, and I'm going to be frank with you. I haven't done the analysis, and I haven't determined all the causes of the problem. There are things which we do well. There's some things that we don't do well, and we have made mistakes. But I feel like I need to at least elevate that up to you at this point in time, throw it on the table, because we didn't really have an admin section where we went through that. And my personal assessment is that this needs to be studied more and analyzed more. And I've talked it over with Laura. She's got a number of things which she's identified, and we haven't really packaged it and so forth. You're welcome to talk to her about that. But I think I needed to at least represent the fact that from the bottom up, there is a call for demand of improving that area. Okay, so if you have any more questions on that, you're welcome to ask me or Laura, but I'm not, again, as the city manager in the budget, I'm not proposing that we add that at this time, but I am listening to my staff, and I've got to get into what are the problems, what are potential solutions, and one of them very well may be that there, in the future, and it may be this year, next year, maybe 5 years from now, I don't know, there might be a need for something like that. But it's my responsibility to tell you that anyway, I believe. So I'll pause there if there's any questions.
Okay, Bill, do you have a time frame that you're suggesting that you would be able to assess this? Is this something that we can assess in the next 30 days to be able to include it in this budget? Or, and I kind of feel that I hear you saying, golly, I can't get it done before the budget this year, but we could look at it in October, and if it was a big enough need, we could make a budget amendment in October, November.
Anything's possible if you put your focus on it. I wouldn't recommend doing that now because got a lot of other things we focused on. I mean, Laura and I had a conversation today that part of the reason why we haven't done the analysis is because we haven't had the time to do the analysis, right? But we're going to get there. We juggle a lot of things and we go in cycles. And so I personally don't see that it's mission critical to get to rush through this to the budget cycle. I'd like a little more time to be able to do that because I've got other things I've got to focus on. But I'm not going to ignore it, and it's something that I owe Laura and Zena and our HR staff. I mean, Zena and Laura share HR duties as well with our AP HR clerk. So, you know, I know it needs to be done. We need to identify what the task requirements are, who's doing it, where our shortfalls and challenges are, and you need to look for solutions, which one of them is to hire somebody else, but there may be other solutions which are there, which I haven't even considered at this point in time. I haven't really dug into this, and I'm not prepared to go all out in the next really next month to be able to come to that solution and do that.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? Bob?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's some underlying things going on we probably need to hear about, maybe not the time to do it tonight, but my question is, and I guess in the analysis we'll hear this, but in a city our size, is there usually a human resource director for a city for the number of
Not looking
employees?
for a director, just an administrator.
So just an admin person?
Somebody that can handle, not payroll, I'm not talking about entering and paying paychecks. The HR duties
Bill, do you wanna
I have
give
a
her
whole,
the
I have a whole list of those types of duties, but,
Bill, do you want to give her the mic?
oh, sorry. So it's HR functions that Zena does a little piece, I'm doing some, and we're doing them I mean, they're getting done, but they're not getting done in as depth. Open enrollment, helping employees, we don't have the time. And my AP clerk is also HR, but her function's really for HR. She does payroll, she processes the payroll. That takes very little time. That's not what we're talking about. And she files paperwork. That's really as much time as she can put towards HR because of all the finance functions. And there's lots of functions she needs to be doing that we don't have time, and then I'm doing, open enrollment. There's tons of stuff related to open enrollment that I do. I mean, I have a list of all things. There's all kinds of stuff.
So we're talking administrative clerk?
An administrator, somebody that has more than just a clerk. I don't need a clerk. I have a clerk. I need somebody that has HR experience, can help with open enrollment, training, doing monthly training things, assisting employees throughout the year with benefits, questions they have. We just don't have the time. Better evaluations, like every year we do evaluations, our forms, we kind of tweak them. It would be nice if somebody had the experience to help, make those evaluations be better when the staff evaluates their employees. Oh gosh, I have a whole job posting. Zena does the job postings, but then she's got a lot of duties, and so all of a sudden you get all these applications coming in. You've got to funnel those through and get those pushed on. There's updating personnel policy, keeping a little more up to date than we do. It's the HR functions, safety, workers' comp, accident tracking. There's just a lot. FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, that's now in our policy. There's a lot of paperwork that has to be maintained. Looking at when people take time off, tracking to make sure that somebody's taking time off. What's it for? Do they need to be getting informed?
Mike?
Two things. First off, this really seems really late in the process to bring this up, since we've already adopted maximum tax rate. The second thing is, out in the real world where we deal with real money that comes out of our pockets in business, we outsource a lot of this. I don't know, is that a possibility?
Well, I did not intend to bring it up, but.
I couldn't hear Mike really well. Would you characterize what he just
So,
said?
so what he said was that this seems late in the process. We've already adopted the maximum tax rate, and can you outsource that? Because in privatized places, you can do that. So, I did consider it, but I deliberately didn't bring it up. But I thought I needed to bring it up in the workshop so you knew that I had considered it and that it's on my mind and it's something in the future that I'm going to be doing. I really don't expect council to take this up unless you direct me to have this completed by, in the next 2 weeks. We're not going to be prepared to be able to pitch this and then be able to present to you that we've looked at all the solutions and the problems, and we've concluded that this is the only way we can do that. You know, I reminded myself that with the police department, we considered additional personnel for years, and then there was several studies, and then it was concluded, and there was conclusion on that. So I'm not rushing to do this, but I did need to represent this, and that's what my intention of this is, to represent it, so it's on your radar screen. And I'm not trying to ambush you, and I'm not trying to get you to favorably take action, but to consider this in the future, and I know that I've got it on my list of things to do.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Michelle?
Well, I kind of agree with what Mike said. First of all, this should have been presented in your budget when you presented it, if it was something we were going to consider. But as you're saying, it's something that you're bringing to us and you're going to be thinking about. I think you need to go do a study and figure out exactly what the needs are. I mean, because we have Laura, Zena, we have an HR clerk, and now you're asking for a fourth person to work on HR. So I don't, we need to see if that actually works with what a city our size does. So I think you should do research and come back to us at a later time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Bill, you had a second item.
This is a personnel action, and it deals with the position of the planner/information systems manager. So this is Curtis, and he's not here now. But he's approached me a number of times, but again, he approached me Monday. And what his basic approach is, hey, Bill, I'm seeking to be a public city manager sometime, and I know I got to work my way up through the ranks and so forth. But a couple things. One is that my job title does not really match my duty description. I believe that I am more appropriately labeled the assistant to the city manager. And I want to distinguish that. It's not the assistant city manager or a deputy city manager. It's the assistant to the city manager. So we hired him primarily with the idea that it was going to be information systems management, be a communications guy and work all the IT stuff, which he does. But frankly, he's quite talented, and he has taken on a greater and greater role. And so we put in the title planner, and that's more of a less traditional role in city planning. He's not a economic development planner or a city future planner that you would see in San Antonio, where they're dealing with annexations and all that stuff. He's more of a planner in terms of staff analysis and plans and developing solutions and recommendations. So over time, he really becomes our go-to guy for preparing all the P&Z plans, doing much of the analysis for Public Works, some with fire and police, as well as the admin staffs associated with it. I give him a lot of tasks on a day-to-day basis. And if I'm really looking at this objectively, he reports on paper now to Zena. He gets most of his directions from me, but as Zena as well. We actually share that duty very well. There's no conflict whatsoever. But he has said that it doesn't reflect what I'm actually doing, and and the reality is that we're not going to keep Curtis forever. He's going to go off to be an assistant city manager or some other division chief, but the current job title doesn't reflect very accurately for him, and isn't a competitive job title for him. So it's more than the job title. It's also a salary piece commensurate to what his responsibilities are. So there is an increase in grade that would be associated with changing this. And so I've actually asked him, okay, Curtis, what is it that you want? And he provided it to me, so I'm going to pass it out to you. Yeah, I'll just pass 5 copies down, and you could just work through that. So he has a proposal, and I have a counter proposal, just so you're tracking through this. And I'm going to tell you up front that I support this with some caveats, okay? So he is currently an a planner information systems manager. He's a grade 23. And he has proposed that he enter in as a grade 25, which is the same level as currently as a police sergeant, the
Grade
police.
28.
Grade 28,
A grade 28, I'm sorry. Yeah, got to think.
25 better, but.
So he's proposing a 28, which is the same grade as a fire captain, a police investigator, and the police sergeant. And so in perspective, you're talking about that level of grade associated with that. And then on the second page, you can see there's an org chart that he would be moved out from the city secretary, and he would be an adjacent line with no supervisory responsibility of any of the directors. So I did a little research on this. There's a number of cities that have assistants to the city manager. And there's a number of cities that don't. Actually, most cities don't. Most cities have a assistant city manager. They actually have an upgraded position, which is an assistant city manager or a deputy city manager. Very few don't have one. Some of the smaller ones don't. And some of the smaller ones also dual hat them. So they'll take a city secretary and make it a city secretary / assistant city manager. They'll take a fire chief or a police chief and make them the assistant city managers. And Terrell Hills is a great example of that, where they and I can't remember if it's the fire chief. It's traditionally the fire chief, and he puts together council packets, and he's at all the council meetings, does a lot of things that's outside that. And did he just get hired, or did the police chief get hired?
The police chief was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
hired, and they actually
Yeah.
hired him as the full-time city
Right. So, so it's this is not just something that I'm dreaming up. Actually, Curtis asked me to bring it and bring it into the city council budget. And I frankly said, okay, this is 2 weeks before the budget. I'm not prepared to do that, and I haven't done the research I need to do that, and I don't want that to be a distractor for both the council, the staff, and me in terms of pitching it for the budget. So I went to Steve Whirling and I said, hey, Steve, do you have any data on this? And he said, basically, no, not equivalent to that. We looked at that, and he had some similar data associated with that with the city of San Antonio and stuff. And so he came to me and said, I recommend a grade 26. And if I inputted Curtis into the grade 26 as he currently stands now, then that's going to take him equivalent to a grade 28 if you started him at 0. And so, if you started him at 28 with no experience, then you would have a figure of roughly $54,000. If you started him at a 26 with the credit equivalent of 2.5 years or whatever it is, I don't know the exact same thing, you get almost that same amount. And that's his recommendation as we would move forward. And I support that. I think that's doable. And I think that I think I can convince Curtis. And so here's the deal. What he's told me is I've got to make a change. I've got to either get a change in how I'm characterized in my job and be compensated for the responsibilities that I have, or I need to aggressively look for another position. So I've had this conversation with most of you. No one's irreplaceable. I'm not replaceable. The President of the United States is not irreplaceable. Everyone is irreplaceable. But the reality is that we've got a great asset that has a grasp of our IT requirements that are fairly complex, as well as he's got our finger on pulse on pretty much everything that goes on in the city, and he's in a support role of all the departments. And he really is, if we're being completely frank about it, performing in a role or responsibility of, as an assistant to the city manager. He also performs a large amount of role still in this IT systems manager director position. And so what I really don't, I don't really see a significant change in his responsibilities because think he's been performing it as he's been. There might be a tweak. City of Church sent me their job description. I have not looked at it in great detail and compared it to what he currently does. But I'm asking, well, he's asking and I'm supporting him on this, a consideration that we get consensus and we include these increases into the budget.
Okay. Now, the consideration of the org chart is always a part of the budget process, and you said that Curtis prepared the org chart change. Is this your recommendation as far as the org? Okay, so you're now presenting us to us your org chart, which includes Curtis now moving over to assistant to the city manager. That's your recommendation to us. And
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
then going beyond that, there is a budgetary consideration, and the number that you're recommending from what Curtis is getting now to the recommendation, and I keep hearing Curtis's recommendation. What is your recommendation for a compensation figure for an assistant to the city manager? Because I know what Curtis does for you, and I know that for at least the last year he's functioned, or for most of the last year he's functioned in that capacity for you, but what are you looking to pay him?
Yeah, I would make it a grade 26, and I would pay, the amount would be $54,000. I don't have the exact, but $54,000.
So it would be 3 years of service credit at a grade 26.
That is approximately, yes. I have not seen the model that Steve Whirling did. I sent him the information. I had a conversation with him this afternoon over the phone. That's what he told me.
Okay. Mike?
Or you noted that he'd be the lowest paid employee reporting directly to the city manager. You're putting him up there with police sergeants, fire lieutenants.
Yeah.
He'd be the only person reporting to the city manager who has no supervisory or leadership responsibilities, not reporting to you, he's just working for you. And so I think that's a mischaracterization. And to say that
Yeah.
the guy working for the city manager should get the same kind of compensation as those who have folks underneath him or her, I think is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, those are his notes. I asked him what he wanted. He gave me that, so I'm passing it to you.
Then that would be my comment on his note is,
Yeah.
so he's not reporting to you, he's working for you.
Yes.
That's different from the directorates.
What are?
Absolutely. So, I mean, part of his, right, I got that. I'm not sure that that's a really strong argument. When I look at where I come with what grade recommendation and where I see him coming in terms of the salary piece, I'm looking at the value that I think he provides to the city across the board, across the entire piece. So, I only said and pointed out that he had asked for a 28, which was equivalent to, the police sergeants and the fire captains. And I've lowered that down there. I think that gives us flexibility, but the bottom line is that, yes, he doesn't have supervisory position responsibility, but the abilities that he has in terms of analyzing and providing solutions and working other things, touch all of us and make a great impact. He is, Mayor said it about the seal coating, but I've used this term before. He's a force multiplier. The efficiency and effectiveness that he has allows me the freedom to do things I couldn't ever do. I would be quagmired in staff preparation in many areas if I didn't have that talent base. So my comparison in terms of, he's not perfect. He makes mistakes. And he's grown a lot also. But I remember when I was going out, bringing in other interns out, that, and two of them were Masters of Public Administration students currently going through programs. One was a young guy, and one was an elder, a middle-aged lady.
Let's not go there.
I'm just saying that,
We're gonna stop
well,
that
the
part.
comparison is that he's extremely talented.
That was the only, that's the level of comparison.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's,
Okay, I do have a question, though. We were
They're
you were
hard to
talking about
find.
supervisors, non-supervisors, reporting and that. What does the detective make? Chief? Oh, you don't know?
I don't know the exact figure. She makes, a detective position draws the same pay as a sergeant.
So she's not a supervisor, and,
She doesn't have, a detective or an investigator position doesn't have any employees under them, but they oversee, because they're overseeing complex investigations for the
Yeah,
entire department. and
they work with everybody.
They
Yeah.
supervise the scenes, I guess that's how Whirling came up with that.
so it's 54,000 is a start for her, but she's got experience that has been credited to her in certification, so it's probably 60,000 that she's making.
Okay. Michelle?
Once again, I have the same issue I had with the last discussion. I don't understand why we're getting this now. We should have been getting it in your budget when you presented it to us. I don't like getting things after the fact, after we voted in a tax rate, after we, have already reviewed everything that you've already given us. I also am a little disconcerted with the idea that someone comes in and gives you everything and kind of is like demanding that you have to do this for them, because we don't have to do it. And the thing that really irks me is this was a job I proposed many years ago through the budget process, and it was supposed to be someone that did communications and worked with citizens, and somehow it's spiraled into this, which is a lot more money. And I mean, I see you saying that he's very important, but you changed his title when we hired him and made him an IT systems manager, and manager was never in what we originally approved, and now we're going to make him assistant to the city manager. And I think we're looking to do something that we shouldn't be doing a position based on a person. You don't pay or do a grade because of a person. You do it because of their duties.
I concur, and I had that conversation with Zena earlier in terms that I don't expect to keep Curtis that long, but when we go out to hire his replacement, whenever that may be, and I don't mean to exaggerate, but the candidate pool is slim out there, and you're going to bring people in there to be a planner, information systems manager. We were lucky to get him, as talented as he is, and you're gonna get a lot higher quality pool when you advertise it as assistant to city manager. There's I've been associated with these, not constantly, but through the TCMA and through other programs with St. Mary's, UTSA, and even Texas State. There's a lot of guys out there that want to be a city manager, and they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no leadership position, and they have this idea that they can go get an MPA and then they can do that. And when you give them a simple task to analyze something like, what should we have in terms of our should we have an iPad, or should we have a tablet, or what we should do? I mean, which we had a guy do. It's just difficult to find a guy that's going to meet that requirement. So part of this is a posturing to make it more accurately reflect what we need in the city. And over time, what he's done is he's absorbed the requirements of what we need. And it's morphed a little bit, and I admit that. To answer your first piece, you're right, and I take full responsibility for not putting it into the budget. And could have, should have, but it gets put together pretty easy, and we get whirling, and I'm trying to get things going on, and change management is something that has to be managed, and you have to introduce it to some degree as appropriate. Curtis didn't come in demanding this in a bad way as maybe I presented it. I have been trying to encourage him professionally to develop himself over the last 2.5 years. So I've included him in our Texas City Managers Association meetings. He comes with us on that. I've invited him to meetings to where he can get exposed to certain things with TxDOT and ACOG and with the mayor and different things, because that's what he wants to do. And I've coached him on what he needs to do to posture himself for the future. So we have these professional conversations all the time, and I've told him, okay, when you're to the point where you're going to jump off, let me know, because I want an opportunity to counter for a while and help you out and help the city. This is really about more helping the city by retaining him a little bit longer, and then when he does leave, then we're postured to hire someone that is going to be a higher quality candidate to replace him. I mean, that's where I would characterize it.
Yeah, Michelle.
One other question from Whirling. So we went to him and he put together this year's changes to positions and money and whatever, and why wasn't this put in on that plan?
I didn't mention it to him. The scope of this study was also a little bit different than last year. Last year, he interviewed all the folks, and he went through that. I can tell you, and I didn't mention this to you, but it just came to me. We had the same conversation last year where, and I think Laura can back me up on this, where do we put him? Because he's acting like an assistant to the city manager, but you don't have him labeled that. And then I can tell you that assistants to city, we kind of did a hybrid last year and said, okay, we're going to keep this here. And there really wasn't a lot of comparison, and we just kind of kept it where it was for the most part. So I didn't talk to him, Whirling, in advance about this. And again, this kind of is building, and it's kind of culminated, and so I felt I needed to discuss it. So I literally just engaged Whirling yesterday, and I've had a conversation yesterday and today with him, and then I asked him to look, and he came up with the $26,000 and the $54,000 without me providing any input whatsoever. Knowing that I don't think he even knew that Curtis had said 28, but he may have known the 28. I think he did know the 28, but he countered it to 26, a grade 26.
One thing Bill mentioned is that Curtis has been interacting with me. I've enjoyed everything that Curtis does. He's a very intelligent young man, and basically what we've had is somebody that has over time exceeded the horizon that we placed before him. And as a community, we have all benefited from the man that Curtis is and the capabilities that he brings to the community. One of the things that Bill didn't include in that is that Curtis is the guy that interacts with Darrell Lang as far as the development of our commercial properties in Chavano Park. That is a very critical role, and the fact that Bill can allocate those responsibilities over to somebody other than Bill is that word that we used earlier with Brandon, force multiplier. That is a very critical force multiplier for our community. This next year, we're going to raise $475,000, $500,000 in sales tax. That is a critical number for us because we're soon to be built out. And when we're built out, the only changes in our budget from year to year to year will be the appreciation or depreciation in our real estate. It becomes absolutely essential that we develop that sales tax base to the extent possible and that we find those alternative sources. And what I think I'm hearing Bill say is Curtis is a source for developing alternative sources of money. We need to continue to develop alternative sources of money. Bill was very good this last year finding money in unexpected places, and I'm hoping that he does as well in the following fiscal year. But that's not Bill's real job. Bill's real job is to be the city manager and to manage the affairs of our community. And I think that we have benefited greatly as a community. We don't wind up in the paper. We don't wind up on the TV channels. We have a very efficient operation because Bill is able to assign tasks to an excellent team. And what I'm hearing Bill say is, I really should have called this guy the assistant to the city manager earlier. I'm presenting the org chart, and I'm requesting that we create this slot for Curtis as the assistant to the city manager. Bob?
So I'm a very, very supportive of Curtis. I think he's done a great job, and I think So my concern is that we're positioning him for this change in title and change in grade so that he can go be assistant manager somewhere else, because he needs that on his resume to change his title. But I'm really curious, I mean, a bit long, what does that mean? Is he,
Yeah.
I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, I think that this will, okay, so he and anybody here can, we can, get a pay increase and then we may go find another opportunity. But I think that this will go a long way to satisfying his immediate requirements so that he's not looking for an assistant job. He has not been seeking any other jobs. Last year, he put his application in. He was a finalist for city and did not get selected. But he has not competed in the last year that I'm aware of. I think I asked him the way I approached it is, where do you need to be to stay here for a period of time? And I didn't ask him for 2 years or 1 year, but I think you're going to get a lot longer extended time because he's going to meet his, he's going to be doing what he thinks he's already doing. And there'll be a bump up in pay, and then that'll help, and the reality is life happens, and it happens with everybody, whether you're a policeman, a public works guy, a fireman, or Curtis. But Curtis is a educated individual. He's got his bachelor's, and he's got a master's of public administration. So he's educated, and he has expectations for where he's going to progress in his field, and this is a step towards that. And I don't think it's going to hasten, I know it won't hasten his departure. It will keep him from looking to seek a departure immediately. That's what he has told me, that what I need for the next step is to get a pay increase and to have my duties reflect what I think I'm currently doing. And it's been a professional way. This has not been a demand. And in fact, he was willing to be here at the meeting and here, and he's curious what your real thoughts are. But I thought, well, I would rather have a open discussion amongst ourselves as we go forward. So, again, I think this satisfies his need for a while and maybe longer. And I also think that if he were to leave, this postures the city better for a backfill. So this isn't going to speed his exit. It's going to slow it down because this would meet his requirement.
And in this role, you're not recommending him take on additional responsibilities for that position, just to continue, just a title change and continue?
I'm going to look at his duty description, but no supervisory positions. I might tweak some of it, but he's really already doing it. I mean, so I'm envisioning that he just continues to do what he does. He takes the largest role in the planning and zoning, although I speak at the planning and zoning and I do all that. We collaborate everything together. He usually prepares all the stuff. Some things I do a significant amount of rewrite. Some things I don't have to rewrite anything because he's that good. But
Okay.
admin? I missed that.
That was a joke. It was Laura's request in the earlier one and making him in charge of the HR. Come on, Bill, you're tired. It's been
Okay.
a long day. Okay, so really, I think that there are three questions. Number one, do we think that Curtis is worthy of the title of assistant to the city manager? Maybe the fourth questions. Second, do we make that a direct report to the city manager and move him off of the line that all of the others are on so that he's not on with the police chief, the fire chief? Michelle's got a picture of what that would look like, to where he's a direct report.
Because like Mike said, I don't think he belongs on that line.
He's not on the line. The third thing is it a grade 26? Is it a grade 28? And then the fourth item is, does he get service credit for what he has been doing for the time here total? Does he get service credit for the last year that he has been a functional equivalent of an assistant manager? Or does he get zero credit?
I think we have one question to start with.
Well, no, I think that those, you have to go in that order, though.
Well, no, you have to have the consensus that everybody thinks he should, any of
No,
this should move
but-
forward.
No, but the first question, well, if everybody says, no, he shouldn't be the
Yeah.
assistant to the city manager, then the other three fail by their own weight. But if they do think that it should be, then the next question is, where do you put him? Next one after that is, what grade is he? And then the third one is, how much are we gonna pay him based upon his service? So the first question that I'd put to you is, do y'all think that Curtis should be the assistant to the city manager? Mike?
Without seeing a job description, I can't answer that. I think what we need to do is ask Bill to come to us with a complete staff action and make a recommendation to us. And if you think you can get it done in this budget cycle and find the money to the $12,000 in the budget to pay him, then bring it back during the budget cycle. But I don't think that we have sufficient staff analysis to answer any of those questions at this point, Mr. Mayor.
So I can do that, and the duty description is the same as is current. I'd probably change the title and then maybe tweak it, but it's not 12,000. You're looking at the men's, so it's really 9,000 or 8,800, something like that is the delta difference in the salary piece. So, you know, I'm not opposed to, and I'm fine with bringing it back for another action, but if there's consensus now, then that would facilitate, and I could still come back with further action.
Like, that's a great middle point, because the first question is this completely unreasonable? The second one is, I'm willing to consider this, but I want some more information. And that's what you just asked for. So that is a critical point. But I do think that we're gonna, if you give us that information, Bill, we're gonna need some help on the other ones as well, because if we're gonna act, we're going to need to understand what we're acting on.
Okay.
Are we in consensus that we want Bill to come back with more information, or should we table this and leave it here for next year? More information?
I think we're gonna lose him sooner than later, no matter what. He's got the wanderlust in his eye already. He's probably already looking. But I would rather have more information.
Bill, would you repeat what he said?
He basically says that we'll probably lose him sooner than later, but but Alderman Colmero would like more information.
Okay, Michelle?
And I'm still annoyed that it wasn't presented in the budget, because I think that's where it needs to be, and that this is like after the fact, and it doesn't sit right, and we don't have enough information.
I understand.
Okay. Anybody have any more comments or questions or concerns about this before we go to the next item? Michelle?
The only other comment I have, and it's hard to say in front of everybody else sitting here, is does this then open the door to someone else coming up and saying, well, I do all these special things and you haven't considered them for me, and I do all these extra things in, you know, this department, and so I should be a higher grade, or I should get this, or and how does that, I want you to consider that.
Okay.
Now, I do want a clarification from you before we leave it at that. Bill, is this your recommendation, or is this Curtis's
Oh,
recommendation?
this is absolutely my recommendation.
That's the key point. You know, I don't want anybody coming to us just willy-nilly thinking that they can make suggestions and that Bill has got to take those to us. I think that Bill should only bring us the things that Bill feels like we should know. But Bill, please clarify that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be upfront with you. Over time, and again, I have had professional development discussions with him and other members of the staff as well. But, you know, I will tell you that I am the one that said, okay, I think we should reclassify you as assistant city manager. You know, that says he is not looking for a job. He has not put his application in anywhere. Assistant to the city manager.
It's just like personally.
Assistant
and
to.
personnel.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We already went
But
to Texas.
I'm the one trying to get him to solution, saying, okay, here is a way to do that. He didn't just come up and say, oh yeah, I want to be the assistant manager. But we've had this conversation that what I'm doing is assistant to the city manager duty. Okay, so it is my recommendation Because I asked him, where do you need to be? Recognizing that I have a problem. And again, this is not about Curtis. This is about what needs to happen for the city currently and in the future. Just Curtis happens to be a very talented guy that we know. So,
Okay. Do you have anything else for us this evening, Bill?
no, we're ready to get any input that the alderman would have after reviewing the budget, and any concerns or ideas or recommendations at large.
Okay. We've been here for a long time already. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to bring to our attention this evening? If you're gonna talk, then take the microphone. Mike?
Here.
I'd like to, in our goals that we set for the city, we want to maintain and I assume improve our Firewise status. And I'd like to recommend that we take a look at doing more Firewise work on the municipal track. I have talked to the Forestry Service, and if we can look at this pretty quickly, I believe it was the 1st of September is their new grant budgets, and we can probably get some more Firewise done at no cost to the city. We met with him last week, Logan, I forget his last name. Sherchill, yeah, something like that. It was kind of complicated. And he's very confident that we could add a shaded fire break onto the municipal track that would allow very low impact and allow our firefighters and fire equipment to get back in case we do have a fire back there. The municipal track, I know that's a very sore subject. I'm not afraid to bring it up. I think it needs to be worked on. I do not want to turn it into buildings and paved concrete. I want it to stay natural. But I do think there's a big fire risk there. And I think we can probably use the grants that are available through the Forestry Service. They will do the work. Our Public Works doesn't even have to do the work. And they will put this shaded fire break in there along a path that there's no set plan for it. I mean, they have to come and do a GPS. They have to coordinate with whoever we tasked to be in charge of this. It's a fire issue. I assume we'd put it under the fire chief to kind of coordinate with them, or Public Works. And they think they can get it done in there. I think they also recommend that we kind of shade back on the De Zavala side, gradually bring it back from the street a little bit. That could improve with just the visual image of the municipal track as you travel down De Zavala. It's just really not very well kept. It's been let go for too long. And I'm going to make that motion or movement that we try and improve it a little bit. I'm not talking about putting buildings in there. I'm not talking about clear cutting it. I'm not talking about anything, but a shaded fire break seems a logical thing to protect those residents along Bikeway and Elm Springs and the city hall and the city's property in general. They also could do, and I think he mentioned that he had spoken to you, Chief Naughton, about a chainsaw class last year when they did the Firewise out here, that you had expressed some interest. He said that could be incorporated into all they're doing this work for up to about 20 people, which could be your people and maybe some of Public Works. Now, that's not covered by a grant. That would be about $1,000. So we could incorporate that at the same time if we can get a consensus to go ahead and do this. Okay, fine. Another thing I've been kicking around for a long time is to keep the habitat, for wildlife. I've always thought it'd be nice to stick a water feature on it. Small pond, stock tank, a lot of different ways to do it back along one of these, if we do a fire path, a shaded fire break, possibly along with that, so that the animals will have water, keep the animals on the municipal track and keep them out of other people's ponds and pools and everything like that. I just ran some budget figures. I have talked to Brandon. There is water available that we could get there. We looked at well 6. Well 6 doesn't seem to be very practical. So it had to be something up towards City Hall, and we would pull it from probably one of the, I think the irrigation lines is what we had talked about, the possibility of using that. So I'm kind of looking at possibly doing something along those lines. We have $26,030, I believe, in the municipal tract fund. Another thing that keeps coming up every single one of our city events is electrical issues. We don't have enough electrical outlets for the events and vendors that need it, and we could pull some money from the municipal tract budget to increase just around the City Hall area on the municipal tract, some electrical outlets and some extensions for electrical service. You know, we're running extension cords all over the place through wet grass and everything like that. It just seems that that's a possibility. So I was kind of looking at that if we go with the, assuming we can get, and Logan is very confident that if we get it in early enough, he can get any Firewise that we do under the grant. And it's very minimal. It would be very far away from current property lines. You wouldn't even see it probably from any residence yards or the streets. So it's going to be pretty low impact. I was kind of running some figures, and I figured we could probably do the chainsaw class, possibly the water feature, might cost around $4,000 to $5,000, and we would add another amount, maybe pull another $9,000 or $10,000 out of the municipal tract fund to go ahead and do this additional electrical work. So we're looking at about $15,000 out of the $26,030, and then we would take the rest of the money that's in the municipal tract and just return it to the general budget to be used for other things. And that would eliminate a bone of contention that some people had for undeclared and unpurposed money on the municipal tract. It would just be gone, but we would use it for to improve in a minor way, I think, a valuable asset for the city. So I just thought I'd throw that out and see what everybody thinks.
Oh, that's already.
Parking.
Is already being studied for low impact parking.
Yeah,
Bill,
that's-
isn't that? KW doing that?
For low impact parking, we've given them a task and they haven't got into it at all. I do have a meeting, I think it's next week, with the folks from San Antonio Water Authority who are they are championing low impact development features associated with conservation. So I was at an ACOG, Greater Bear County Council Coalition of Cities, and they did a pitch in which Leon Valley has done a parking lot, low impact development, which doesn't look like a parking lot. It's got these pavers which are permeable, and you put them out there, and there's grant monies associated with that. So I've invited them to come out and look at our municipal tract back here, and then there is a grant period coming up, which they're going to advise us as to how to approach that, whether we would be competitive or not, and we'd be looking at competing for that grant if we were a fit associated with that.
Did you say that was from Sarah?
Yes, San Antonio Water Authority.
It's
It's either San Antonio, it's either SAWS or Sarah.
Sarah,
Okay.
this is Sarah money that,
San Antonio River Authority.
River Authority.
Okay. Not water.
Been a tough night. Yeah.
okay, so what Mike is saying is that he would like to see more Firewise. Now, Mike, you know, when they put in the, what was the word you used? Improved fire break? Is that what?
No, along Days of Valley.
No, along,
Shaded fire
The shade, okay.
Shaded fire break is what Logan called it, and it's a canopy to canopy. It's basically not really removing trees, it's just underbrush. And most of that will be the scrub cedar, which is choking everything out anyway.
So you're creating this fire break, where you're pulling out stuff, and would that allow people to walk, to have access to the property, or would it be only for nature, or, you know, how does that work?
I don't see a reason why it wouldn't allow people to use it. I'm not talking about putting any nature trails in at this time, but that's a possibility. It would at least give a clear path.
Well,
It makes sense to do it.
Yeah, a continuing problem that our community has with the 16 acres is that it's subject to a reversionary interest. If we don't use it for municipal purposes, a nature path would be a municipal purpose. I would really love to see us put a stake in that so that we would not have the possibility of having the people who gave us the property come back and say, we'd like it back. If you take the per acreage value of Huntington property and superimpose it on that 16 acres, that property is worth somewhere between $5 and $7 million right now. That's enough money for somebody to get a twinkle in their eye and say, that's something that I can have, and I would hate for us to wait too long to dedicate it to something, and this is the least intrusive use that I can imagine from a municipal purpose that would encompass the entire 16 acres, so that we would have the ability to preserve this as our property and not have the risk of losing it to somebody else. But that's a secondary question from what Mike's purpose was. He's saying he'd like to protect our next-door neighbors, which I think is extremely laudable, from to reduce their fire risk associated with being next to the municipal track.
And plus, we can probably get it done with no out-of-pocket money and no task to our, public works. As far as trails, I don't see why you couldn't put a low-impact mulch-bedded walking trail through it with, let people walk through and just, look at the deer and things like that. If there is a water feature, then there could be some viewing opportunities for wildlife in there. I haven't really gotten into too many details on any kind of a water feature. It's not an expensive thing to do. It's something that, would have to be planned through, Public Works and staff. It's kind of simple. I don't know. It does improve it. I have talked to a couple of people on, just to get some ideas on what kind of their water troughs is what they are, their stock tanks. That a few people that pour as a stock item, and they've all expressed, well, two of them have expressed an interest in working with us and have already said that they would be open to giving us, some shaded discounts and help us out a little bit, maybe with delivery and things like that. They would deliver these tanks. We wouldn't have to do anything, just find a place and drop them off.
Okay, Bob, I think you were.
Well, you mentioned the timing of it for fire-wise, the grant. When is the period?
The Forestry Service grants all start fresh on September 1st. If we could give them a general consensus that we're agreeing to do this without any real plan. I mean, now the water feature and everything and all that, that's not part of anything they're going to do. That's just, if we do the fire break, then I don't see why we couldn't add the water feature. If we're not going to do the fire break, then the water feature just goes away. What Logan said is, this is a very small project compared to what they normally do. And he said he doesn't see any problem at all with getting it completely funded. Since we are a fire-wise city, that's essential. We are a fire-wise city. We have that designation. And to do it without a fire-wise designation, I think it's $1,000, $1,500 an acre, something like that. I don't remember the figures. And he would be able to present that. Now, he could, you know, if we could get him the okay, there is some legal paperwork that has to go back and forth. I think they did that already on the other one, so it's kind of, everybody kind of knows about it. And he can get it presented. As far as doing it, they would rather do it in the winter. When November, December, January, when it's cooler and when the native growth is more dormant. Plus, there are some wildlife considerations. If they should stumble across a golden-cheeked warbler or something in there, then they have to kind of like rethink everything.
Which wouldn't be in there because they nest.
They would not be in there. He said there is no problem with that as a rule because they wouldn't be in there. That's why they do it in the winter, to avoid their nesting season. It's disturbing them in their nesting season that they're concerned. There was another one, a Vibrio of some kind, I don't know. He said those are not a problem either because they like new growth or new reformed land.
They would be attracted as.
They would be attracted to it. We could also use this, although the city's not really part of this yet. There is the, you know, little group that we have going on with the National Wildlife Federation certifications. This would be a big point total for that to get the city certified. And it really isn't going to be that expensive.
Okay. Anybody else? Mike?
Once again, I have no idea what a shaded fire break looks like, where it would go. I think we need something more than a verbal report to start even thinking about it. But even before that, let's remember that the majority of the folks who responded to the municipal tract survey said, leave it natural, leave it alone, don't do anything. And I haven't seen an amendment to that. And so we know that the majority of those folks that responded said, don't do anything. And so why is there a push to do anything? That's what I don't understand.
It's not a push, to be honest with you. It's just, I think it's a good idea. And during the election cycle, I spoke to a number of people. I'm on record of leaving it natural, and that's what I'm intending here. But I also said everywhere I talked to, and I had everyone agree that it's a fire hazard and it's a mess. And I'll stand by that. And I will take the heat if there's heat. Send it to me. But I'll defend it. Now, as far as what a shaded fire break is, it's essentially a canopy to canopy, where the two canopies of trees will almost touch. And it goes up to about, I believe it's 6 or 8 feet, Mike, do you know? 8 feet off the ground for clearance. And it's just it's not a very wide path, and it's mainly the underbrush. And what will be mostly removed is going to be the scrub cedar. And he's looked at it. Logan has seen it. So, I mean, as far as you want to see something in a hard copy, I guess we can get something from him. I don't know, but I'm just bringing it up for consensus.
Okay, anybody else have any thoughts?
No, I think it's a good idea.
Bob? Mike wants a little bit more information? Okay, but you didn't say no, so that's good.
Well, I say no until I get more information, yes.
Okay. Okay, are there any other items that people would like to bring forward? Also, Mike, you did say that he wanted to release back the rest of the municipal tract money. I don't know that I got anything from Bob and Michelle as far as that was concerned. Are y'all okay with releasing the money back?
I'm not
Okay.
either.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else have something that they would like to initiate? Because, you know, you guys do the budget. Y'all have, we don't just take things from the city manager. You know, we've got Mary Ann over here working on the 300th anniversary of the tricentennial of the city of San Antonio and our participation. We haven't seen anything on that yet. I'm sure that that's coming in the future. But there are things that we have done that have always come out of council, and this is certainly a time that is appropriate to bring up any of your new items that you have on your wish list. No other wish list items? Mike?
Well, I would be in favor of the release back stuff. That's 2 and 2. I guess we need to figure out what the consensus is.
Okay. Anything else? Bill, do you have anything else that you'd like to bring to us this evening?
So just,
Are you weighing in on the consensus, I think he was asking?
so there's the moment where we've presented the budget, and presumably you've looked at it, and hopefully we did a good job of going line by line, and we're at the 99 percentile, but there's possibly line items that you have further clarifications on or questions on. And now would be the time to do that now, so I'm not hearing that. And that makes me feel kind of good about the budget. But I would like to see if there's significant concerns or areas where we want to take a look at. If you don't have it prepared now, shoot me a note and we'll take a look at it in this process. Now, the next scheduled meeting is August 22nd, and there's 2 things we're going to do there. It was originally, a special council budget workshop, and then as a result of the last city council meeting, we've also scheduled as an agenda item the accessory buildings and to review that. Prior to the 22nd, which is Tuesday, if there are anything I can do to go over individually with you, departments or different areas of the budget, I'd be glad to. Shoot me your concerns or issues. As a takeaway, just taking notes here, we're going to do some analysis and thoughts on whether we can or should recommend use of crime control prevention district funds for the emergency generators as proposed by Chief Naughton and the Public Works Director. There was the $26,000 that Alderman Simpson made as a point of, it hasn't been allocated, and so he's made a request that we allocate some of that. That was in the earlier meeting. Alderman Colomer's got a plan for $15,000 of that, which should be considered and talked about again. We're going to transfer the requirements for funding the raising and the improvements of the fire hydrants from water to general fund budget. We'll add crack seal machine to the general fund budget with solutions as to where to fund it. I will bring back a job description and do a little bit more analysis on the proposal for an assistant to the city manager reclassification. So we'll try to prepare that for the next budget. Mike, I'll meet with you and you can kind of outline where you're thinking, and maybe we can describe the fire-wise tree canopy. I mean, that's probably easy, but conceptually on a map where you might visualize that, we can probably portray that and then show that.
I have a very rough proposal. It's not even a proposal, it's just kind of showing kind of like what you can do from Logan.
Okay.
There's really nothing there, but I'll meet with you anytime.
We'll get with that and then we'll project it so that it's a visual aid to understanding what you're trying to do. I'm going to talk to Brandon about stock tank. I'm not an expert in that. My dad has 4 or 5 of them. He ran from a well all the way through about a mile of his property. So it's not terribly complicated, but the rock makes it a little bit more complicated. We hand sawed it, hand did it ourselves. It's all sand and it was relatively easy, but.
Well, I can go over that with you. There would be no digging
Okay.
involved in what I'm considering.
Okay,
Unless you want to, Bill. I
no.
need some
You did a
therapy
good job
with
on
some.
the tree.
The tree's still living, by the way. I water it about once a week. Improve the electrical. I've, Mary Warner, and during the events, it's come up several times, and so I think I understand what you're talking about. I'll call you tomorrow, and then maybe we can get Bill Rhodes to kind of get, what does that mean, and what would it take, and where would we do associated with that? I'll ask you what a chainsaw class is, and I'll get more information on that.
I don't
one.
have a clue.
We'll get with Logan on
I'll have
that.
to
and
call
we'll-
Logan or maybe
Well, I'll
the
have
chief
Chief
knows
do that, working through that.
Totem poles or something. Giant
It's something about trimming out for firewalls.
Oh,
4 days?
dang it. There was something I wanted to present to also, and I just got busy today. So in the Planning and Zoning Commission, they've gone through several meetings where they talked about the vision, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as well as strategic goals. So there's a survey, and there was actually input, and then we did a public hearing, and there was great input, and there were some recommendations to change the vision statement. And I will send that out to you tomorrow. It's actually really good.
Coming back to the budget?
It's part of the budget. There is, yeah, it's in the budget. And so at last night's meeting at the Planning and Zoning Commission, there was a consensus of agreement on of a replacement vision statement. And there was a consensus, but they didn't vote formally, that for adopting the strategic goals. Now, it's the same 8 strategic goals, but there was some wordsmithing, some minor wordsmithing. So what I will bring to you at the next meeting, well, I'll send it to you in advance so you have it, but I think it's a better product, and City Council kind of in these workshops 2 years ago and 3 years ago, 3 years ago and 2 years ago, and then last year, you've adopted that. It really is a better vision statement than what we had, and I would propose that I bring it to the next special meeting, workshop, and then we will review that, but I wanted to introduce that to you. I think it's easy to just adopt into the budget, and then as part of the town plan, it may be tweaked a little bit, but probably not a whole lot, so.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, I'd ask for comments from council members, to open that up one more time before I entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Michelle's moved to adjourn. Do I have a second? We have a second from Mike Simpson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. We are adjourned.